Good morning and welcome to the August 9th, 2018 Zoning Board of Adjustment meeting. If any member of the audience wishes to speak to an item on the agenda, there are speaker request forms to the left of the dais. Please fill out the request with the agenda number of the item you wish to speak to and hand it to the secretary. At this time, we would like to ask that if any member of the audience has a cell phone or other electronic device, that you either turn it off or turn the ringer to silent. If you need to take a call, please step out to the hallway so the meeting is not disrupted. The public hearing on item number 1, the approval of the July 26, 2018 Zoning Board of Adjustment meeting minutes, is hereby opened. And I guess I'd look for a motion on those minutes. Karen made the motion to approve the July 26 minutes, and Galen seconded that motion. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion carries. Public hearing on item number 2 is now open.
It was continued from the July 26th meeting to this meeting to allow the applicant and staff to contact MDU to determine if a gas line can be moved. Let me refresh you with some slides. Properties located at 830 Lemon Avenue, Zone Medium Density Residential District. This is an aerial showing the single-family dwelling and the garage, which has been demolished. The applicant is requesting the variance to reduce the minimum required front yard setback from 35 feet to 15 feet. As we discussed previously, the applicant came to the meeting with a graphic showing that there's a gas line in that backyard, and was for the justification for their 15 feet. Staff's recommendation was to reduce to 20 feet. Staff did reach out to MDU, and we do have they didn't want to write us a letter, but they did agree to a statement, which they confirmed. They said, there is a retaining wall between the residence and the location of the proposed garage to address an elevation difference between the structures. Due to this elevation difference, MDU had to bore 6 to 8 feet deep to place the existing line under the retaining wall and in an alignment to serve the house. This location was chosen to minimize the depth of the trench. Relocating the gas line may result in additional trench depth, which creates maintenance issues. In addition, excavating another trench under the retaining wall creates safety issues. It is the preference of MDU that the gas line remain where it is currently located. Staff's recommendation is still to approve a reduction from 35 feet to 20 feet. Gas line is not something that we ever take into, or is not something that is reviewed as part of a variance, because it is assumed that it is part of the cost of a variance is determining where your services are and moving those services. The applicant is in the audience and has a short presentation prepared. Are there any questions for staff?
I don't see any questions for staff at this time. I do have a couple speaker requests. Is one from Virginia McLeod. Is that the request for the presentation? I think we'd start with that.
Pictures to put up?
Yeah, I do later.
Okay.
Thank you. First of all, good morning.
If you could start with your name and address, just for our record, I'd appreciate it.
My name is Virginia McLeod. I live at 830 Lemon Avenue, Rapid City, South Dakota. I would like to say this has been quite a learning experience for us. We moved here from Iowa, where you don't need permits to build a garage. So I want to apologize that we kind of got started on this without having the proper knowledge of what we needed to do. We certainly have that now, so I appreciate and apologize. As you just heard, Montana Dakota has given a statement that the gas line with the retaining wall, there are safety issues in trying to relocate the gas line, and has indicated that this is not a viable option. I have a photo. I would like to address the concern of the vehicles protruding over the sidewalk. I have a picture showing our largest vehicle if it were parked in front of the garage. As you can see, there is no concern about blocking the sidewalk. We also want to keep any person or child safe on the sidewalk. Again, I would like to thank you for allowing us to present our findings for your approval, and again, our apologies. It's truly, truly been a learning experience for us. Thank you.
Thank you. I also have a speaker request from John Roberts.
Thank you very much. Woo. I'm used to being up there, not down
Yeah,
here.
you got to identify yourself.
I am
still.
John Roberts, 840 North Spruce, number 299, Rapid City, South Dakota. I was here last week, or 2 weeks ago at the meeting, and afterwards spoke to the Blacks and went over and looked at their house. And you know, I just want to say a few things. About 10 years ago, about 3 years ago before I got on the council, I started working with some nonprofits up in that area, up in Lemon Street, because we were having a terrible issue with crime. And one of the big reasons we were having such an issue with crime was because there were so many rental houses compared to owner-occupied houses up there. So one of the things that I want to say is I want to give them credit for purchasing this house in the condition it was in, bringing it back. I mean, it's absolutely beautiful what they've done to the inside of this house. But, you know, looking into this a little, I just want to go through a couple of things. I know that, you know, some of this you can't really use for your criteria, but I still want to go through a couple of things. The assessed value of the structure itself is $54,000. The total assessed value on that house is $78,000. So this is not a high-dollar house in a high-dollar area. And for them to move the water line, move the footings on their foundation, it's over a $10,000 cost. So you're looking at about 20% of the structure value. And I just wanted to point that out. Also, this is an extremely small lot for a corner. It's 50 foot wide by 140 feet. So they don't have a big footprint to put anything on it. And as you know, by ordinance, or by zoning, on a corner lot, you're supposed to have 35 feet. Well, if that was the case, they'd have 15 feet left without the setback on the other side. So, you know, they do have to have a variance one way or another. They need to have a variance, put the garage on the lot. But another thing, I went out and I shot the actual footage from the sidewalk to the garage. It's a 6-foot sidewalk, and from the back of the sidewalk to the garage, it's just under 31 feet. So there's a lot of room in their driveway to be able to park. And then also in that one block area, there are 4 other homes that from the front of their garage to the sidewalk is less than 16 feet. One of them is actually 13 feet. So we're not changing the neighborhood, you know, other than the fact that we have somebody that's coming into a neighborhood like this, putting a lot of money into a structure like this, which I wish a lot more people would do on Lemon Avenue. But you know, one of the things that I want to point out is by bringing more of these people that are homeowners into this neighborhood, in the last 10 years, we've decreased crime by about 80%. So, you know, as we fill up these neighborhoods with homeowners that are willing to spend this kind of money to bring a house like this up, we're doing a great justice for Rapid City, and especially for North Rapid. So, you know, I just want you to keep this in consideration. There's plenty of room to park there. They're not changing, you know, anything in the neighborhood. All they want to do is replace a garage on the same footprint that it was for 50 plus years. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Questions or comments from the commission on this item? Karen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I'm a little confused about the setback for the garage. Typically, from the back of the sidewalk to the property is, or to the building, that's your setback area. And so the difference that they're talking about, we talked last time about having at least 20 feet so that you could park a car or a vehicle or truck, you know, larger truck. And from the pictures and from what John is saying, there's lots of room. So could you explain that difference for me?
The setback is from, and we can use their picture, one sec. The setback is from the property line. This is actually curbside sidewalk. You can see from their picture that the, across the alley or block is property line sidewalk. So property line sidewalk is what it's supposed to be. If the road were reconstructed, they'd probably put in property line sidewalk instead of curbside sidewalk. If engineering disagrees, but I don't know, or do they agree?
Todd?
For collector streets and arterials, property line sidewalk is required. This is a local street, so it could be either curbside or property. We prefer property, but it's not required.
Thank you.
But the setback would be from the property line, not the sidewalk. So the concern being, if the sidewalk were moved to property line, it would overhang a sidewalk. But as it is, with 15 feet, a vehicle would encroach into the right-of-way.
Okay. Galen?
Yeah, that's good information. I think that wasn't very clear from last meeting of what was going on there. So I think I'm going to support a 15-foot 15-foot adjustment, just like so they can rebuild their garage as it is. It's heard from MDU that's going to be too much of a pain to move it. There's not really going to be an issue with trucks hanging over on the sidewalk. So I will make a motion to approve variance to allow a 15-foot setback, citing the criteria that this is number 2. The variance is a minimum adjustment necessary for the reasonable use of this land. Reasonable use meaning you can rebuild your garage in the same spot.
Okay, Galen made the motion to approve or grant a variance to allow a 15-foot side yard setback in lieu of the 35-foot that's currently in code based off of item number 2. And Mike Kwasny seconded that motion. I do have a few speaker requests up. So Rachel, thoughts on the motion?
Well, I just wanted to thank you guys for, kind of putting the footwork in and actually getting the information together. I know it's a process to kind of, you come into a new area and you have to figure out, well, what are the laws in the area and how can I abide by those laws? And I really appreciate you guys, kind of doing an about face and really putting in that kind of footwork. And it really makes things a lot easier for us up here because then we actually have an idea of what's going on. As opposed to, last time it felt like we didn't have a solid idea. I don't know if the statement from MDU actually supports the variance, from 35 to 15 feet, but I'm not going to oppose it because I think you guys really have, we've demonstrated, I think, that it's not going to be a safety issue just because of the curbside sidewalk. So, thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. Justin?
Thanks. I just want to reiterate what these guys just said, having last time being part of asking for more due diligence. So I appreciate the effort to do that. I think for me, I'm with Galen with the MDU letter. And then frankly, the sidewalk information would have been good to know last time too. That certainly helps me. So I'm also in support of it.
Karen?
Thank you. And I also support a variance. My only question is, at the last meeting, we were talking about doing an 18-foot, I thought, and would that suffice, or does it still need to be 15 from the applicant?
Our recommended is 20.
Yeah, I know.
We've done 18 in the past and still would overhang the right-of-way.
Yes, and I understand the staff's recommendation. I think my question was, would 18 suffice?
Mr.
Yeah.
Chair,
Yeah, Vicki?
if I might. So they're proposing to use the existing foundation. That sits at 15 feet. MDU put a minimum separation on the opposite side of that foundation that they needed to provide maintenance. So if they have to push that garage back, then it's going to interfere with maintenance of that gas line for MDU.
Okay,
It's a tight fit.
yeah, thank you.
So we have a motion on the floor. Kurt, would you like to comment on the motion?
Yeah, 50-foot wide lot is pretty narrow for a corner lot. And, I just don't see how they could pack that in there with, moving it back to 35 foot, let alone, 20. I would support this based on that being a 50-foot. And, I didn't realize there was a retaining wall there that didn't show up on your site plan. And, that definitely affects the ease of moving a gas line. Normally, you could probably move a gas line for a couple $100, and having that depth to get under that retaining wall, also I'm in favor of this.
Thanks, Kurt. So the motion on the floor by Galen and seconded by Mike is to approve a variance to a 15-foot side yard setback in lieu of 35 feet. Any further questions or comments on this one? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. I think that's the final item for our zoning board of adjustment meeting, so I'd look for a motion to adjourn zoning board of adjustment. Rachel made that motion, and Galen seconded the motion. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. So we are adjourned from zoning board of adjustment, which means we will now commence the Rapid City Planning Commission meeting for August 9th, 2018. Again, if any member of the audience wishes to speak to an item on the Planning Commission agenda, there are speaker request forms on the table along the left wall. Please fill them out with the item number you wish to speak to and hand it to the staff. Consent calendar. Items 1 through 8 have been placed on the consent calendar and may be approved as a group. Action will be taken on all consent items in accordance with staff's recommendation by a single vote. Any item may be removed from the consent calendar by any planning commissioner, staff member, or audience member for separate consideration at this time. The findings of this planning commission are recommendations to the city council. The city council will make the final decision. The Rapid City Planning Commission's actions on these items are final unless any party appeals that decision to the Rapid City Council. All appeals must be submitted in writing to the Department of Community Development by close of business on the 7th full calendar day following action by the Planning Commission. Are there any items 1 through 8 that staff would like removed?
Yes, items 2, 5, 6, 7, and because Commissioner Gallagher spoke with me before the meeting about an issue, also item number 3.
Okay.
2, 3, 5, 6, 7.
Ooh. So, any planning commissioner want to take 1, 4, or 8, or 1 or 4 off, or 8 too, I guess? No. Any audience member want to take any of those other ones off for separate consideration?
Wait, you're taking them off, or you're going to consider them? I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
The numbered items, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, we're going to consider each separately and individually.
Mr. Chair, on
Yeah,
item
Nikki.
number 2, we were made aware by an audience member that they had some concerns with the rezone application, so John is going to give a brief presentation.
Okay. I'd look for a motion first to approve 1, 4, and 8.
Move to approve that.
Okay. Galen made the motion to approve items 1, 4, and 8 per staff's recommendations, and Mike seconded that motion, Mike Kwasny. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion carries. Item number 2.
Item number 2 is a rezoning request from from general commercial district to medium density residential district for the property at 816.5 St. James Avenue. And I have a quick presentation. I just need to get it started. 1 second. Fletcher, I may need a little help. Still very uncertain. Okay, item 2 is file 18RZ021. It is a rezoning request from general commercial district to rezone to medium density residential district for the property at 816.5 St. James Avenue. The property is approximately 7,000 square feet in size. Access to the property is from the north alley between St. James Street and Fairview Avenue. So access would be from this alley up here to the north. Future land use for the property is identified as urban neighborhood. Medium density residential district is an identified zoning district in urban neighborhood for the future land use plan. St. James Street is classified as a local road, and this is just about a block off of Mount Rushmore. I was able to take some site photos at the site earlier this week. This is from the north side of the property looking south. Looking east back towards Mount Rushmore Road, along that access alley. Looking back to the west. This is looking south at the property itself. There is a small garage and a small house, both of which are currently legal, non-conforming as to setbacks. And this is looking straight south along the actual driveway that the residence uses to park. And staff would recommend supporting the rezoning from general commercial to medium density residential district. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions, and we also have a citizen in the audience that has some questions as well.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah, thank you.
just to add to what John said, I did have an opportunity to meet with the property owners. They had come into the office looking to secure a building permit. They own several properties within this area. And when they realized that the zoning didn't support residential development, however, the future land use plan did, we encouraged them to rezone it, noting that the 2 residences that are located on the property today are legal nonconforming. You can only have 1 residence per parcel of land. They indicated that in the future it would be their intent to remove those homes and come back with 1 new home on the property, or look to see if they couldn't refurbish one of the homes. Several options, but they were aware that if they were to change anything or need a building permit, they couldn't retain the 2 homes on the site.
Thank you, Vicki. I have a speaker request from Susan Jones. If you'd like to speak to this item. If you could just give your name and address for their
I'm
records.
Susan Jones. I live at 1811 9th Street, Rapid City, South Dakota. But I'm a property owner at 1315 Mount Rushmore Road, where I had a business for over 30 years. I've been here multiple times during that business ownership and property ownership because of the changes the city has done. In order for me to practice there and have a business, I was required to have a certain number of parking spots per individual employed there and per client that would be coming. At the time, we qualified and had 1 extra because we had parking on the street. We were also guaranteed, you know, at that time they were putting the no left turns into the alley. We were guaranteed that there would not be a no left turn into the alley. We were guaranteed that our parking would never be removed. And so we have lost 3 spaces out front. And so that building is not in compliance with what your codes are for a business, but you said that would be fine. So, so I'm looking at they gave parking, if you want to put that up, they gave parking just off of Mount Rushmore Road on Fairview and on St. James, perpendicular parking. And I have photos on my phone if you want to see them, but at noon, the parking is out of 7 spaces, 1 is at handicap parking, and 5 are already filled at noon. So, and then if the parking at the business is full, then people are parking further away or over on 9th Street. My, all of the deliveries that are made to the business have to be made through 9th Street and the access of Fairview and St. James because the trucks are too big for the alley. All the UPS people drive that alley. And it's not, you know, I was required to pave it to the end of my property, but there isn't really, the property next to me to the south has 1 parking space available for a client. And then the next building had spaces on the street, but those are considered now public spaces because they're the perpendicular parking. So, so you've made practicing a business much more difficult in the area, and if you take away the ability for us to purchase property that could add parking, it's going to be very difficult. There's already a huge move to have more and more mother-in-law type apartments or whatever you want to call that, where we have low-income housing in the area, and that's going to mean more parking on the streets and more cuts. So when you put a cut in to put 3 cars parking, you take away 2 on the street. So you only add 1 parking space. There just is not enough space. And so then you have, you know, that property that they're speaking of has not been used for 8 years. There's not been anyone living in there for 8 years. And so the traffic has changed since it was. And so I just have concerns that the businesses on Mount Rushmore Road are destination businesses. Most of them have been there a very long time. They've been very good at contributing to taxes and trying to make a neighborhood where people can walk to receive services. And also, you know, now that you can't turn across from the south, you have to turn and do a U-turn. It's made my business much less accessible. And now the possibility that there'll be more parking in the area makes it even less accessible. So I find it a major concern that the city has disregarded where people can park to get to these businesses and not added more parking or made it possible for us to purchase the area for more parking. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Jones. Appreciate your comments. I guess I have one question on this one. It currently zoned general commercial.
Correct.
How would the access to that parcel, if somebody elected to use it as general commercial, would it still be through the alley?
Excuse me, that is correct.
Okay.
At this time, the only access to this property is via alley.
And I don't have it in front of me, I'm sorry, the parcel size is?
It's just under 7,000 square feet for the parcel, which would be in compliance for a medium-density residential lot.
For
a
one
single-family
single-family home.
Okay. Thank you.
And just to note again that the rezone is in compliance with the future land use plan for the city. I appreciate all that the property owner in the area said. Certainly, I think that the state's project along Mount Rushmore Road We've received a lot of feedback from some of those businesses. There was some coordination with the city on the side streets and trying to create additional street parking. That parking that's on the street does go to the viability of a successful business. However, it can't legally be counted as their parking, nor are they hindered if it's taken away. As long as the parking they have on site doesn't change, then whatever the state or the city does on the street doesn't put a mark against them. But I completely understand her comment saying they need that street parking to be a viable business. Somewhat of a separate issue than this.
Thanks, Vicki. Any other questions or comments on this item? I don't have any lights out. Okay, Galen made the motion to approve item number 2 per staff recommendations. And Karen seconded that motion. Any comments on the motion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 3.
We're having trouble seeing anything on our screen, and Fletcher's got this mastered, so he's going to be helping John and I as we proceed this morning. So Mike asked, before the meeting, visited with me briefly about some concerns specific to this preliminary subdivision plan, which is to create 28 townhome lots and 11 single-family residential lots. So the property is currently zoned low-density residential 2. At the time that we reviewed this area with the developer, they at one point showed this to be one lot, and it is actually one platted lot. As a part of their master plan, they did show that this would ultimately have a cul-de-sac constructed onto the top of that hill with townhomes and single-family homes. However, at the time that the townhomes were approved for this area, this was just shown as the one lot that it is today. Somewhat misleading, I think, for the property owners in the area that did show up at City Council, for those of you remembering that those townhomes were in a planned development along Nugget Gulch, and that did get appealed to council. Some of the residents thought that the area thought the density was a little extreme, and they were required to lose one of the townhome lots as a result of that. However, the master plan that we had seen at that time for the property as a whole still showed that in the future that this development would come forward. Staff has continually had issue with the double frontage on these townhome lots. They've got streets on both sides. However, that was approved by the council as a part of that master plan, and they are now bringing forward what they were previously identified as appropriate. We've noted to the developer that as a part of the subdivision improvements, sidewalks are required whenever it's not determined that a building permit would be secured for a property. These folks here, when they get their building permits, have been responsible to put sidewalk along Nugget Gulch. So as a part of the subdivision improvements for this plat, the developer will have to put the sidewalk on the other side of that street so that that property owner doesn't in the future get assessed for that. Kind of more of a side note. But the proposed lots meet or exceed the required lot sizes for both townhome and single-family development. We do have an issue with a couple of the lots because of some drainage and stormwater features, and one of the stipulations states that before they submit the development engineering plan application, which is step 2, where they bring in the full construction plans, we need to see where those buildable envelopes are on those 2 lots, or the plat needs to be adjusted to create buildable envelopes. So with that, staff is recommending that the preliminary subdivision plan to create 28 townhome lots and 11 single-family residential lots be approved with 17 stipulations of approval. And Mr. Chair, I believe that Mike wants to speak to this. Mike, do you want this one left up, or is there a better one?
Thanks, Vicki. Mike?
Could you use your mic?
Turn it on. Okay. My concern for this one, and Vicki kind of clarified that, was when it went before the zoning change, that there was going to be the one lot for that whole big area there. And then it comes back to this, and all of a sudden that there's going to be, 39 different things up there. And so I understand that there's some information I wasn't aware of, but that was kind of a concern for us. My second big issue is that actually that road and what the configuration of that site, that road is actually right on top of the hill. And basically the topography drops off steeply on both sides of that. And one of the things that I'm mainly concerned about and I'm opposed to is this building these homes on the side of these hills and just the appearance of that type of a thing. So that's my main concern there as it's laid out now. Just it really doesn't fit. That road there, they've actually kind of, that road is partially completed now, as they did a bunch of dirt work for those townhomes alongside the road there. But the final road configuration is right on top of the hill, and I'm just concerned about those homes hanging over the sides, both sides of the hill.
Thanks, Mike. Rachel?
Yeah, just a question for staff real quick. There is fire protection, like fire sprinklers in these homes, because it's a cul-de-sac, right?
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, Vicki.
That is a very good comment. So because there's more than 20 dwelling units on this cul-de-sac street, they need to seek an exception. And my understanding from the fire department is, in order to secure that exception, they will require residential fire suppression systems.
Okay, thank you.
Tim, does that sound right? Sorry to put you on the spot.
Nope, that's all right. That's great. That's my favorite topic anyway, so. Fire sprinkler protection, but yes, that's correct. Those residences that will be constructed on that cul-de-sac will, all of those will be protected with approved residential fire sprinkler protection. The developer and the property owner has agreed to that at this point, so it should be moving forward.
Great, thank you. Kurt?
Mike brought up the point of having the houses built on the edge of a steep grade. Has there been any geotech information to support that type of construction?
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, Vicki.
So the geotech analysis is a requirement of the next stage of the proposal. There's been some conceptual grading information and topographic information, but nothing beyond that. Of course, just based on the terrain in our community, we see similar conditions in many other subdivisions.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions or comments on this item?
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, Vicki.
We do have someone from the project that's here. They're looking at purchasing this and actually developing the property.
Okay.
So if you would.
Sure. If you can identify yourself and give a address.
Good morning. My name is Floyd Simeonek, Bella Vista LLC. We're purchasing this property from Zeus Holdings, and that's kind of why we're pushing it through the approval process first before we purchase it. And just to address the topography concern, we have plans to change the topography greatly to add more usable flat land. So there's going to be a boatload of dirt moved. So we're not going to just build the road and the houses the way the land sits. There's going to be a lot of slicing off of tops of hills and filling in ravines and stuff to make that more presentable.
Thank you. Mike possibly has a question.
Could you expand upon that a little bit, where you're going to put all this dirt? Because I'm familiar with that area as well, and
To the, if you see where the road goes right up through the middle of the property, to the
You
south of
maybe
there.
hold on until we get a picture, that would help.
Now you can actually draw the picture.
Do we have the aerial picture of the road?
Yes.
With the proposed lot layout? There we go.
Perfect.
So basically, right now, the road,
You have to draw it.
okay? Basically, right now on the, it's not working. There we go. The road is centered kind of on the high ridge that exists right now, running east-west on the property. The fill is going to come off of the back of the homes where Nugget Gulch is here. That's a steep incline of about 30 to 45 feet. We're going to drop that, my plan is to drop that down 20, 25 feet and take that fill over to this area right here and then slope that downward because this section right here is low. And then also the very top of the property up here is quite high, and there's a ravine right here that will be taking fill off the top and putting in that ravine to make a more accessible maintenance road for the water line that comes over from Bella Vista. They've given it a lot of thought as far as where we're going to get this fill from, where it's needed.
So, Mr. Chair,
Yeah,
if I
Vicki.
might. So as he's explaining this, just note that the stipulations of approval do require that the stormwater quality and drainage issues that would need to be addressed in order to move that soil need to be submitted with that next phase of the platting process before they start pushing that dirt around.
And I do, is to address that earlier concern of stormwater quality, I believe we may lose 1 or 2 lots for the future retention ponds over here and then possibly over here, which KTM also identified to keep all that water from ending up going out on Nugget Gulch.
do you know the volume of material that's going to be moved?
I don't, because we haven't got to that stage yet. That'll come in the engineering.
I think it's going to be very large, and I think that needs to come into consideration as we look at this one. Thank you.
I assure you, when it's done, it's going to complement the area. It's not going to be an eyesore. We're still going to keep, we want to maintain the views. We want to maintain the views. So we're not going to drop it too far down to make it perfectly flat, because then you lose the view. But we're going to try to find that happy balance in between maintaining the view and then building more usable space.
Thank you, Mr. Simunek. Karen, do you have a question here?
I guess this is a question for maybe the staff. When he talks about filling in a ravine, that raises a red flag with me. So I just want to make sure that when they do move that dirt, that people take a look at that, because that would be a drainage area to start with, and I'm assuming that staff would look at that. Thank you, Todd.
Vicki.
Mr. Chair, Mike, I certainly can appreciate your comments, and staff shares those same concerns when we see a project of this size and know that there is going to be elevation differential from what we see today. The preliminary subdivision plan is really the what if. If I were to plat, what would I be required to do? That's why there's 17 stipulations of approval. And in there, they will need to bring in a full drainage plan, stormwater quality control plan, grading plan, geotechnical analysis that includes pavement design. It's quite extensive, and many times when you hear developers go before the council and say, you know, it's frustrating, it takes too much time, it's costly, it's because we are diligent in making sure that all of that criteria is submitted. We review it, we redline it, we return it back and forth, sometimes a few times, until we do, to the best of our ability, ensure that it does not impact those adjacent properties. But certainly I can appreciate that looking at it without additional information, we need to all be on the same page that that will be thoroughly vetted when the construction plans come in.
Thank you. Are there further questions or comments on this item? I don't have any more requests to speak. I guess I'd look for a motion then. Okay, Rachel made the motion to approve item number 3 with staff stipulations.
Second.
And Kurt seconded that motion. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion carries with Mike G. voting no. Item number 5.
Mr. Chair, if we could take items 5 and 6 together.
Sure.
So these items, which is a plat and an associated rezone at property located at Valley Drive in Copperfield Vista. The attorneys determined here a few years ago that we didn't have to advertise the rezones with the full legal. We just had to cite the general location. So that was taken off the application, and the east of Valley Drive and west of Copperfield Vista was switched. And we received a phone call from a property owner in the area that received a letter and said, I know where the property is, but you've got your directions wrong. Well, we reviewed it and we thought, you know, to ensure that we're meeting all proper notification, we need to continue this and send out new letters and publish again with those directions corrected. And so staff will be doing that. The applicant has been made aware and appears at this time to be in concurrence with continuing these items out to the September 6th Planning Commission meeting to allow that publication and notification requirement to be met.
Okay, Vicki. Excuse me, sorry about my voice today. Is there a motion to continue? Would the commission concur?
Motion number 6.
Okay, Galen made the motion to continue to September 6th. Is there a second? Karen seconded the motion. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 7.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item number 7 is a preliminary subdivision plan to create 2 commercial lots. These lots are on the south side of East Mall Drive and north of I-90, and is a part of the Hayland LLC property. And they do own an extensive amount of land in this area. As a result of the plat, there's going to be an existing lot that will be landlocked, and they're leaving an unplatted remnant that will be landlocked. We had 3 stipulations of approval for this development since East Mall Drive's already constructed, and one of the stipulations we cited was to create an access easement to those 2 landlocked parcels. But the attorney's office reminded us that you can't grant an easement to yourself, so that option doesn't work. We've been discussing with their attorney several options that could work, so we would like to revise stipulation number 3 as noted in the handout on the dais, that states that prior to submittal of a final plat application, access to the unplatted parcels shall be secured. And then we'll work through that with the property owner and ensure that before the final plat comes in for recording, that we have no landlocked parcels in the area. We're recommending to approve with the revised stipulations.
Sounds good. Karen made the motion to approve item number 7 with the revised stipulation number 3 as well as the other 2. Is there a second to that motion? Galen seconded the motion. Any discussion on this one? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Item number 7 is passed. Item 9.
Item 9 is a 18 PD 025, a final plan development to allow a bank. Let me get to the slides. Property zone general commercial district. The applicant's proposing to construct a bank that's 2,768 square feet in size, with 2 drive-through stalls, and they're requesting an exception to allow 2 ground signs with a separation of 50 feet in lieu of the minimum required 100 feet. As you can see, it's located along North Creek Drive and East North Street, and then there's dedicated Camden Drive right-of-way, which is a part of this plan development. One of the stipulations of approval is that a building permit not be issued until the right-of-way is vacated, and a final plat is submitted to vacate Camden Drive right-of-way as part of that final plat, but they won't be able to get a building permit until that's completed. In addition, we've seen a comprehensive plan amendment in the past, removing Camden Drive from the major street plan, and that has been approved. Currently, the property is void of any structural development. It's a combination of, I believe, light industrial and mixed-use commercial. And then you can see that North Creek Drive is a collector street, and East North Street is identified as a principal arterial street on the city's major street plan. Here we have the site plan. Access will be taken from North Creek Drive, Lower Order Street, showing some turning movements. The applicant's requesting an exception, but that would be from the infrastructure design criteria manual, not a part of this final plan development for turning radius. And then we have a landscape plan. Development is in compliance with the zoning ordinance. Elevations of the proposed structure, and then here we have the signage, which they're requesting the exception for. Here you see the other ground signs, and they're primarily directional signs. However, directional signs are only allowed to have 5 square feet of sign area, and these are a bit larger, but they do serve the purpose of a directional sign at the entrance to the property, and staff is recommending that the exception to reduce the separation be granted. Here we're looking into the property to the west. Sign is posted along North Creek Drive. This is First Interstate Bank. They're actually located in that building in the distance, and they're going to be moving into this new structure. Looking towards the parking lot of Menards, and let's see, that would be southwest along North Creek Drive. Again, Menards to the north, or sorry, southeast. This is looking directly across the road on North Creek Drive. And then looking to the north and west, and north along North Creek Drive, and then to that northeast. Staff is recommending that the final plan development be approved with the stipulations noted in the staff report. The applicant's consultant is in the audience if there are any questions.
Kurt?
Yeah, you talked about vacating Camden, and it kind of draws a little bit of a red flag for me. Looks like on the major street plan that's a planned collector street to connect on to North Street. Has the major street plan been revised to not have that access, or is there no access allowed on North Street anyway? What's happening with that?
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, Vicki.
So KIP recently brought forward an amendment to the major street plan that shows that Camden Drive will no longer be a collector street. In addition, there was a plat that was before the Planning Commission recently that showed the vacation of Camden Drive and was approved as a part of that plat. We do anticipate, thank you, Kip, we do anticipate that there will be an alternate connection to East North Street north of this area that will provide access and that connection in the future.
So is all of Camden Drive then, all the way to the south to, what is that, Anamosa Street?
Maybe Kip can jump in at this point. Since
Sure, thanks. Kip Harrington, Transportation Planning. I have a digital version of this, but it's just easier to grab the paper one. So, as you can see in the proposed revision, Camden Drive was expected to extend down this way. It has since been relocated up here to the north as an extension of North Valley Drive that comes up like this. So there will be access provided as well. However, it's just been shifted slightly to the north to connect with Creek Drive and then possibly to East North Street in the future.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Thanks, Kip. Appreciate you coming in to help us out with that. Any other questions on this item, comments? Guess I'd look for a motion then. I don't have any lights up. All right. Mike Gallagher made the motion to approve per staff recommendations. Is there a second? Rachel seconded that motion. Discussion on the motion. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 10.
Item number 10 is 18 UR 007, a conditional use permit to allow a car wash in the general commercial district. The reason this is on the non-consent agenda is because they are also requesting a digital reader board, and the Planning Commission has directed staff to bring forward any electronic reader boards that are proposed in a conditional use permit or a plan development to the Planning Commission for their review. Let's get to... Property is located at 2308 West Main Street in the Zone General Commercial District. There is the location of a former Tidal fueling station, which has since been demolished. So currently there's no structural development on the property. Future land use is mixed-use commercial. We have light industrial to the north. But if we go back, we have the railroad to the north. We have a commercial mall to the west, a federal credit union to the east, and then to the south on either side of Dakota Drive we have a couple of fast food restaurants. West Main Street is a developed commercial corridor in the city, and as well as being identified as a principal arterial street on the city's major street plan. Here we have a site plan for the proposed car wash with circulation, tunnel car wash, one lane with multiple pay stations here coming in. Traffic will go around and out. Landscape plan, and then elevations of the proposed structure. Here we have a picture taking a look to the north into the property. This is to the west. A couple of restaurants in that building to the west. Along West Main Street to the west. See the other commercial development in the area. Looking south at the intersection. And then to the southeast and east along West Main Street, and then the adjacent property to the east. A couple issues with this, which are stipulated. One of the site plan identifies some fencing along the west property line and around the proposed dumpster enclosure in this area and along this property line. That is a 20-foot wide sanitary sewer easement, so no structures are allowed within that easement. So when the building permit comes in, either they need to demonstrate that the fencing proposed is removable, or that no fencing is proposed around those on that west property line around the dumpster enclosure. Another thing that the applicant should be aware of is that there is a traffic study for West Main Street corridor, which identifies some medians being put in West Main Street, and that the applicant should be aware that future construction would would include putting in those medians. But with that, staff is recommending that if the planning commission finds that the proposed electronic reader board sign measuring 60 square feet is appropriate in this location, that the conditional use permit be approved. The applicant's consultant is in the audience. If you have any questions, are there any questions for staff?
Thank you, Fletcher. I don't have any lights up on this one. Anybody have any questions, comments? Karen?
Thank you. If the applicant would like to come forward, I'd like to ask a couple questions.
If you could start by identifying yourself for the record, we'd appreciate it.
Good morning, I'm Todd Ossenfort.
Hi, Todd.
Hi, Karen.
I have two questions. The first one is, you have a fence that you plan to put on that west side. Is there a reason for that? Is it because of the lights coming out, or?
It would just enhance the car wash. The proposed fence that I have is a black rail fence that would just enhance the landscaping. What we plan on doing that is putting concrete anchors in so that with bolts so that the fence can be removed. Currently, the easement is abandoned. There's nothing in there, and I don't know what the future plans are, but so that's the plan right now, is to put concrete anchors in the concrete, and we'll be able to take the fence out, and the goofy dumpster enclosure would be removable also.
That sounds good. The other question, not a question I guess I have, is you have a car wash on Highway 79 or
Campbell.
Yep. And I know that there's a digital sign up there. And my question is, or I don't know if it's a question or a request, that sign has a lot of moving parts and stuff to it at times.
Correct.
And I'm hoping that in this area that you can limit that, because it's such a congested area, and I think if less movement in that sign, it would be beneficial to the traffic going back and forth, and more of a static sign if you can. That's my request, and it's not something that we can require, but
I'll follow all the city ordinances currently in place for the digital reader board sign. But in the car wash business, the digital reader board sign is the best form of advertising I've got.
Yeah,
So
I understand.
It's crucial.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I'm not saying you can't have it. I just am asking that you take into consideration the traveling public.
Sure.
Okay. Thanks, Todd.
Yep.
Kurt?
Yeah, a question for engineering. Mr. Ossenfort said that easement has been, that sanitary sewer has been abandoned. Is that correct?
The easement was acquired a couple years ago prior to a future project, so there's no sewer in there now, but there is a potential to put sewer in the future.
Okay, so it's part of like a master plan in that area to eventually run sewer through there?
Correct.
Okay. Does engineering have a problem with working around the fence and if it's removable?
The one on the lot line is right on the very edge of the easement. It should not be an issue. The dumpster one, if you can move it like the dumpster is going to have to be moved, then we can work around that.
All right, thank you.
Further questions or comments?
Motion to approve per staff recommendations.
All right. Galen made the motion to approve item number 10 per staff recommendations. I guess I didn't. Rachel made the second. Any discussion on that motion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 11.
Mr. Chair, can we take items 11 and 12 concurrently?
Sure.
Okay. Item 11 is 18RZ023, a rezoning request from Light Industrial District to Office Commercial District for property located at 1622 and 1636 Concourse Court. And item number 12 is 18UR008, a conditional use permit to allow a church and an elementary/middle school in the Office Commercial District. These are both for the same property. This property is located north of the intersection of Elkvale Road and Concourse Drive. It is in a 200-plus acre industrial park. As you can see, current zoning is light industrial. Properties to the east, west, and north are zoned light industrial as well. Property on the south side of Elkvale Road is zoned general commercial district. Property is currently developed with a structure which is used by the Black Hills Workshop. It's a Black Hills Workshop Training Center. I'd like to note that on July 18th, staff was invited to take a tour of the property with the applicant and their consultant. But you can see on the north side we have parking, and on the south side we have that structure which the applicant's proposing to convert into both a church and a associated school. Future land use is currently employment center, with Elkvale Road being identified as an entrance corridor, and then we have a community activity center just on that east side. I'd like to note that staff will be bringing forward a comprehensive plan amendment to change this future land use plan for this area north of Elkvale Road from employment center to light industrial, which reflects the current development in the property and the current zoning of 200-plus acres of land in this area, an established industrial corridor. Here we have Major Street Plan identifying Oakville Road as a principal arterial street and Concourse Drive as a minor arterial street. So these are streets designed to carry heavier traffic, and they do have more truck and freight traffic, or potential for truck and freight traffic, with access to Highway 44 and to the north to Interstate 90. And that is promoted in the comprehensive plan, is to have that close access from light industrial to those corridors. Here we have a site plan submitted by the applicant, rendering of potential opening, and then the floor plan showing the church and school areas. I'd like to note that the proposed church will have 100 to 125 members and services between 9 a.m. and 12 p.m. on Saturdays. A church is allowed as a conditional use in the light industrial district, and one of the stipulations of that is that no services take place between 7 a.m. and 5 p.m. Monday through Friday, and that's to avoid getting that church traffic and that industrial traffic mixed and causing issues. So the proposed church with services on Saturdays is in compliance with the conditional use in the light industrial district, and staff is recommending that the conditional use permit to allow a church in the light industrial district be approved. And one of the stipulations being that no services or youth classes take place between 7 a.m. and 5 p.m. Mondays through Fridays. The proposed school, which is associated with this church, will have a maximum of 75 students in the future, but will operate between 8 a.m. and 3:30 p.m. Monday through Friday. This is in direct conflict with the conditional use permit requirements for use like this in the light industrial district. Rezoning this property in the middle of a 200-plus acre light industrial park goes against the intent of the ordinance to promote, and the comprehensive plan to promote, compatible development with surrounding neighborhoods. Currently, when I go through the pictures of adjacent properties, we'll see that there's, well, from the applicant's photo, there's a credit counseling and an industrial building here, and then another for lease with offices, industrial building to the north there. Right here we have Kids Castle, which is a daycare. There is a conditional use permit to allow a child care center in the light industrial district for a child care center which primarily serves the employees in the area of a light industrial district. So that's why you will see this use in this district right adjacent to this property because it is serving the employees of the district. Here we have looking into the property. Signs are posted on the property. Parking on the southwest side of the building. That's Elkville Road in the distance there. Property abuts Elkville Road. This is one of the proposed outdoor play areas on one side of the building. This is looking along Concourse Court out towards Concourse Drive. You'll notice there aren't any sidewalks in this area. The applicant's indicating that students will be carpooled, but you'll typically see a school in a residential district, and it is a conditional use in a residential district. Because one of the benefits is having sidewalks and being able to walk to school. This is the existing parking lot, which on the other side of Concourse Court. That's looking towards where that child care center is, which again is a conditional use in the light industrial district. More of the development in the area. These take access from Concourse Court as well. Here we have along the northeast side of the property, the fence with some razor wire on top, and then looking at the adjacent warehouse distribution center adjacent to the property. And then on the other side of the building with Elkville Road, on that side, is the other proposed outdoor play area. And then looking at the credit counseling building, and then looking out from the property line at Elkville Road and that general commercial property that's undeveloped on the other side of Elkville Road. And then looking towards the intersection with Concourse Drive and north, see the trucking traffic in the area. And then looking along Concourse Drive into the light industrial park, which is called the Rushmore Regional Industrial Park subdivision, and looking towards the intersection of Elkville and Concourse Drive. Staff's recommendation is that the conditional use permit to allow a school be denied. In addition, staff's recommendation is that the rezoning from light industrial to office commercial district be denied, mainly because it's not compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. The proposed use and times of use aren't compatible with the current uses or any future use that is more industrial in nature, which could come in. But we are recommending approval of the conditional use permit to allow the church in the light industrial district with the stipulations noted in the staff report. The applicant and the applicant's consultant are in the audience to answer any questions. Are there any questions for staff at this time?
Thanks, Fletcher. Anybody have questions for him at this point? Real quick. Galen?
Just to clarify, so I'm sure you're saying the only reason the rezone from light industrial to office commercial is needed is because of the school conditional use permit. If we approve it without the school, then there's no need for that rezone.
That's true.
Okay.
I don't have any other questions up. I do have a couple speaker requests. I'll start with Janelle Fink, or I guess I'll start with Brad.
Good morning. I'm Brad Sadoff from Black Hills Works. I'm the CEO for Black Hills Works, and as was mentioned, we're the current owners of this building, and needing to sell it no longer is working for our purposes. But anyway, my statement is that we support this rezoning and conditional use permit for this property. We've been in this property and using it since 1985, and working very, very harmoniously in this location and all of the adjoining businesses and uses to serve both our clients, which are people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. That's our mission. We teach, train, help citizens of our community that have intellectual and developmental disabilities. And unfortunately, there's been some changes in federal laws that are making this building not fit our needs, serve our purposes any longer. The transition and sale of the property will be a great benefit to Black Hills Works and our mission, as we must locate from this property to continue to provide services to our clients. Based on the new federal regulations, the building layout and surrounding uses, we believe that the school and church will be compatible use for the property and will share very, very similar similarities with the way that we have used this building for the past 33 years. So we respectfully ask for your support for this.
Thank you. Janelle?
Good morning, Janelle Fink with Fisk Land Surveying. I am here on behalf of Black Hills Works and the Seventh-day Adventist Church. I know that you've had a long morning already today, but I hope you saved a little bit of concentration and time for us to kind of sort through this. It's a kind of a unique and unusual request that deserves a little bit of time and attention. So I'll start by saying thank you to staff to take the time to visit and tour the property. We really appreciated that. And from our perspective, we really strive to find common ground for our clients with staff when we come forward with something. But unfortunately, this circumstance, we just really quite weren't able to bridge that gap. So we're not quite on the same page today. And I think today, in your staff report and from what Fletcher said, you heard words like inconsistent and maybe incompatible or not compatible with this area. So those are things that I'm going to try to show you where I think we are consistent and we do have compatibility. So as we go through this, I hope you kind of keep those in mind. And I also want to clarify that today, the request is for the school and the church and the rezoning. If they don't all go together, then just the use as a church is not suitable for their purposes, and so I believe they would withdraw their request unless everything is approved. So the school is the primary focus. So I'm going to start talking about the zoning today, and I'm just going to hit light industrial really quick. That term industrial kind of makes people think, ooh, lots of real intensive activities, and to some extent, there can be that, but that's not always the case. Light industrial also accommodates uses that are like office uses, but maybe somebody just needs a warehouse. In this particular area here, the dark line kind of outlines the particular area of Concourse Court and what we're looking at. This is on the far southeast corner of Rushmore Regional Industrial Park. It's not in the heart of it. It's not in the middle of it. This particular building here was the Mid-Continent building. It's been vacant for about a year and a half. 75% of the building is offices and about 25% is warehouse or storage for their use. So keep in mind when you hear the term light industrial, sometimes it's office uses with a little bit of warehouse or something else that goes along with it. It isn't always an intense use. I'm going to switch course and talk about schools a little bit because that's probably something that we don't deal with a lot. I don't imagine you get a lot of applications for schools, and it's not something we work with a lot. So when you look at our zoning ordinance, where can you do a school in our community? Where is it permitted? Basically, there's two places where it's permitted. In an ag zone designation, agriculture, you can do a permitted school use, or in a public zone designation, it's a permitted use. That's a pretty limited window of availability of property in our community to be able to do that. You can do it as a conditional use in a residential area, and by virtue of the conditional use, you can do it as a conditional use in an office commercially designated area. That's why we're here today for the office commercial zoning. So we really have pretty limited opportunities in order to do a school in our community. There's not a lot of ag land available. Unless you're the city of Rapid City or a federal entity, you don't have public lands. And when you think of our residential areas, most of those are already developed and have schools in them? I mean, can you envision an area in South Canyon or Meadowbrook or South Robbinsdale where there's a large enough piece of property that you could actually do another school building? And those buildings actually would have commercial characteristics to them, you know, just in terms of the size and the amenities that you need. Now, parochial schools don't really fit the same mold as a public school. And there's nothing in our ordinance that says anything different or any different designation for a parochial school versus a public school. So there's a lot of similarities. So they're kind of public and parochial are kind of like fruit, but they're also apples and oranges because they're not really quite the same thing. In particular, parochial schools serve an entire community and area, not a neighborhood. This isn't a school where somebody's going to necessarily be walking to school. This is a destination school where people bring their children for this specific use and this specific purpose. Accessibility is more of an issue for a parochial school. Being on an arterial or somewhere where you have easy access is an important feature. And they will often characteristically share spaces with the church. Now, we don't have a lot of parochial schools in our community, but we do have a few and that have been real solid and long-standing. So I'm going to just remind you of some of those. First ones I'm going to talk about are up on the Highway 16 corridor that have been there for quite some time. Zion Lutheran Church on the east side near the water tower is on an agriculturally zoned piece of property, and it's a church and a school. Well, obviously, they're not using it agriculturally. It's zoned ag so that they can do the church and the school. As is Calvary Christian across the highway, as is Memorial Christian, also just across the highway on Highway 16. And 16 is one of our biggest and busiest corridors for commercial activity, residential activity, one of our very busiest streets. And actually, the Memorial Christian School up on Highway 16 has commercial zoning and activity that abuts that property as well. So sometimes we see parochial schools that are in areas that bump up against or touch other more commercial activities, and not just in residential neighborhoods. The other probably largest and most familiar is St. Thomas More and the former St. Elizabeth Seton, which is located on the corner of Fairmont or Cathedral and 5th Street. And that is also in a residentially zoned area, but it's not residential use, it's school use. And it's also across the street from the largest employer in Rapid City. When you think about that hospital complex and the number of people that are serving that school is located directly across from there. And that school's been in existence as long as I've been here, so probably 50 or better years they've been operating successfully in a busy location and adjacent or adjoining a busy and thriving commercial activity. So when we look at our parochial schools, there's different needs. Okay, now I'm going to talk a little bit specifically about this location, this Rushmore Regional Industrial Park. It was originally developed in the late 1970s and has kind of continued to develop and expand even today. This corner here that you're seeing on the overhead were the very first lots 1 through 4. This is lot 1, which is the Amcon building, first lot platted, and so that's been there the longest. And this, it's an entrance corridor, and it has kind of a different character than the rest of the industrial park. There are smaller lots, and the uses are a little different and more along the lines of office use. This property on the corner here is Pioneer Credit Counseling, which is owned by Todd Ossenford, who you just heard from a little bit ago. He actually also owns some property directly across the street here as well. Staff mentioned and showed you that the smaller building here is a Kids Castle daycare. And this building to the north is AE2S, which is an engineering firm. So it houses or contains their offices for engineering functions, no laboratory functions or anything like that, strictly office use. And then you have the Black Hills Works building. The other small building in this concourse court is occupied and used as Ka Industries, which I believe is Willard Water. So they're just doing a small distribution of water there. And it's isolated. That access to concourse court doesn't access anywhere else, and this is on the perimeter of this particular industrial park. The larger use to the east, Amcon, This big building over here, you saw a few pictures in there. It faces the other way. There are no windows, no doors, no driveways, no walkways, no circulation that actually impact or interface with this smaller area in Concourse Court. So it's totally separated from that larger activity. And then I wanted to point out that maybe you saw in your packet or your letters that Todd Ossenfort also sent a letter of support saying that he believes it's an appropriate use for this area. And I'm going to switch over and give you a little bit more information now about the Black Hills Works use. Brad told you that they've had the property since 1985. It's a training facility that offers training for their clients and enrichment opportunities. So it's like an educational thing. They're bringing people in and they're teaching them skills on site and they're practicing some of the skills on site. And then they have enrichment activities. Say somebody can only maybe work or train for a couple hours a day. Maybe that's their limit, and so they have other activities. Daycare is definitely not the right word to use for describing what they do, but they provide other activities to keep them engaged and occupied during the time that they're there. So currently, Black Hills Works has been serving 93 clients, 93 special needs clients, and 27 staff. So there's 120 people operating in that building every day. There are buses that come back and forth at various times of the day and drop off the clients for whatever period of time they're there, whether it's 2 hours, 4 hours, or 8 hours. And they're engaged in training and educational opportunities while they're there. So they've been a good neighbor. They've operated successfully and safely integrated into this area for 30-plus years. They've been one of the longest users in this area. And as Brad mentioned, due to federal changes, they can't operate that program on site, so they need to sell the property and relocate their program, so it doesn't function for them anymore. Now I'm going to switch and give you just a little bit more information about the Seventh-day Adventists. They've had a school operating, much to my surprise, a small school, since 1950 in our community. I didn't even know that. They have a small but very consistent enrollment. They currently have 26 students enrolled in their school with 14 on a waiting list. So they're projecting to serve 40 students. The number of 75 that you heard is because I pressed my client and said, you have to tell me what is the max that you can even envision that school supporting, because we need to disclose that. He said, well, maybe 50 or so. And I said, think really hard and be sure, maybe something would change in the future. So we pushed and the number was 75. The expectation for operating when they open is 40 students, 2 teachers, a secretary, and an aide. So you're looking at 44 people inside that building that's now supporting 120 people using it, that's been using it for 30 years. Okay, the Seventh-day Adventists currently, their space doesn't allow for expansion or for them to provide indoor recreation opportunities for their students. They're proposing a K through 8, no daycare, no high school. They have that opportunity elsewhere. Their congregation is pretty small, but it's consistent. And they're not in a position really to economically feasibly purchase new land and build an entire new building on their own. You can imagine that with a smaller congregation, that would be a huge investment to make, and difficult to find suitable land that is zoned appropriately for this use and available for them. So this building is particularly uniquely suited for their purposes. Okay.
Janelle, I'm going to ask you to wrap it up soon. I've given
Okay.
you about as much as the city presented for.
I'm sorry. I'm trying to move through it. The interior to the building lends itself to the school with very little remodeling. It allows them to do indoor recreation, and the area for the congregation with pretty limited modifications. Fire department toured the property. The suitability and safety is good for this property, good fire protection, wide hallways, multiple exits. Students are brought in by their parents. Carpooling, it's anticipated that you may have 15 to 20 trips in the morning, maybe 15 to 20 trips in the afternoon, which is comparable with the busing that's currently taking place. We talked about the calendar is 8 to 3:30 or so, and they don't operate in the summer, so there's actually going to be almost a fourth of the year that they wouldn't have people on site. So, let's see. Here's my summary. I'm almost there. Okay. When we're talking about reasonableness, consistency, and compatibility, I've got 17 reasons why I think that falls into this area. Number one, Black Hills Works is an important part of our community. They need to sell this property to continue their mission. Number two, the Seventh-day Adventists need a new location for their school and church, and it's important to allow that in our community. Parochial schools are important. We need to find ways to make that happen successfully in our community. Number four, our current ordinance provides pretty limited opportunities for schools that are not public schools. This is difficult. It's a square peg in a round hole. It's hard to find the right place for this. There are incredible similarities between this site and other Rapid City parochial schools in terms of being located to commercial or other activities and being located on arterials. This is the entrance corner of the Regional Industrial Park is not and has not really been used very industrially. It has a much more office commercial character. And because this is on the perimeter, it wouldn't be unusual to see a perimeter buffer zone or a change in a zone up against the edge or perimeter of an industrial park or property. That's a tool that they use sometimes to transition between different uses. So having this office commercial on the edge or the entrance wouldn't be really out of character. Black Hills Works has operated, like we said, successfully and safely for 30 years in a similar fashion. It's very difficult and challenging to find buildings that are suitable, and this building is uniquely adaptable for this purpose. Concourse Court has limited traffic. There are 3 buildings that will actually access through, that will come onto or in front of the church. One of them is actually the church itself. The other one was the Kaw Industries property, which is the Willard Water, pretty small, and the other one was the Mid-Continent building to the back. The current and pending enrollment is about 1/3 of the use of Black Hills Works, and there's no interface really with any industrial activities or heavy industrial activities in this area. Church activities, as staff said, wouldn't present a conflict Saturdays and evenings, and we have a letter of support from the neighbor, and no objections as far as I understand. So, thank you for your time this morning, and I understand again that maybe from a pure planning perspective that on paper the idea of an office commercial zoning on the edge of a light industrial project maybe doesn't make the most sense to them. But when you look at the specifics of this application and the difficulty of helping somebody find a place for this particular use, I think that this meets that and actually exceeds. I think it's an excellent opportunity to blend both the needs and fill this need and provide this service for the Black Hills Works as well as the Seventh-day Adventists. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you again for your time.
Thanks, Janelle. I'll go to Rachel.
Ms. Fink, I always look forward to your presentations. You do such a tremendous job, and I have the utmost respect for you. As well, this is Black Hills Works is trying to sell this property because it doesn't meet their needs. And they're trying to put a school and a church in there, and I think that's fantastic. And then, you've also looked at the neighbors. As it stands today, it would probably be just fine. Mm-hmm. My major concern, though, is what happens in the future. Maybe the church chooses another location, they grow out of this location, which I'm sure is a goal that they would love to have, but they grow out of this location, someone else moves in, maybe the AE2S, which is an engineering firm, isn't there anymore. Things of that nature. We have to consider what happens now, but also what happens in the future. If the students are currently going to be bused in, but maybe we have a different scenario for a future school that chooses to buy that after you leave. We have to look at that too, and unfortunately, I just have too many concerns about safety for, children coming into an area that is largely industrial, even if it's on the edge. I wish I could say yes, but I'm just having a really hard time with that. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. Kurt?
I just want to say I'm going to have to abstain from this vote, as my office of employment is one of the offices that Janelle showed in the square area, so I think there's a conflict there.
Okay, Kurt will abstain from items 11 and 12. Galen?
Thank you. And echoing Rachel's comment, thank you, Janelle, for a great presentation. It really kind of helped clarify of what's going on with this situation. And I was a little on the fence on this. I don't like, and I think the city's has the same position. They don't like breaking up these zoning maps. So you got all lots of the same color. A little scary to put in one lot that's not the same color as the rest of the zones around it. So that's probably the biggest obstacle that we need to get over. But when you started describing the uses that are in that corner, that square corner that you're describing, if we rezone that whole thing as office commercial, I don't think anybody would care, because that's what's currently being used. It might be a little more restrictive for future property sales, possibly. I'm not really sure on that, but I think I'm tending to agree that we should do this and do the rezone just based on the neighboring properties are all functioning as office commercial, and it really shouldn't be that big of a deterrence for this. So that's where my mind's at now, and I'll wait to hear more.
Thanks, Galen. Justin?
Thank you. So I guess I have a couple questions. I think both a couple really good points. I guess initially I think this is a good idea. I think I support the idea of what you're trying to do. I support what Black Hills Works needs to do. I think we all respect what those guys do day to day. So my couple questions are either rezoning the whole square, is that an option? Or if we leave it light industrial but allow the church and school, is that feasible? So I don't think we can get too much into, well, what can happen in 10 years or 20 years? I mean, we can do that all day long, but would that restrict some maybe future uses down the road if we were able to keep the zoning the same but allow the use they're trying to do? I don't know, is that feasible? That's question one. I'll just lay my questions out and then everybody can answer them. And then two, with Concourse being a minor arterial, I'm trying to remember, I've driven that quite a bit. Is there a turn lane into that facility currently? Because although I completely agree that you're having less people than Black Hills Works did, so really the traffic shouldn't be impacted, but I know at 7:50 on a school day what that looks like too. And not having a turn lane, could people trying to whip into Concourse Drive to go to work, and it's stacked up now back on the Elkville because there's not a lot of room, is there, I don't think there is a turn lane, or am I wrong? And if there isn't, is that an option to help alleviate some of the traffic concerns during the peak hours of, the peak 10 minutes before school that tends to back up? So those are my, I guess, couple questions.
Some help from staff?
Yes, Mr. Chair. So in order to rezone that whole corner to office commercial so that you would not create spot zoning, which, as you know, is something that we steer from as much as possible, it would require that all of those property owners sign an application. And even though the uses today may be somewhat office in nature, just note that those buildings, because offices are allowed and other industrial uses are then also permitted, their higher use for resale may be leaving it as light industrial. Offices are there, but as you saw from the pictures that Fletcher provided, there are warehouse doors on many of these structures that take deliveries and such. As far as the turn lane, Ted, are you familiar? Is there a turn lane on Concourse, or maybe Janelle?
No.
Do you recall? I didn't think there was.
No, there's not a turn lane, and I'm not sure that there's sufficient width in the right-of-way necessarily to accommodate that. And I would say that, again, that Concourse Court has functioned since 1970 and at times when even the Mid-Continent building was occupied and used, and we're anticipating really less traffic. So our thoughts were that it would function appropriately and safely the way it is.
Mr. Chair, in answer
One-
to his final
Okay, yeah.
to his final question. So right now, elementary schools are not allowed in light industrial districts, whether they be parochial or be public. And in looking at it from a planning perspective and knowing that having one who's utilized the elementary school at Elizabeth Seton, that does operate more like a public school. Families come in and drop them off and pick them up. There's a football field. There's large green areas. I don't think that staff would be in support of doing an amendment to the light industrial district to allow an elementary school, regardless of the limitations we would put on it.
Thanks. Was that?
Yeah, that answers my questions. I'm on the fence on this one too, because I think we've got to be cognizant of the planning piece of it, but I actually, the intended use and what we're trying to do, I support too, and helping both the church and Black Hills Works at the same time. So I guess I'm not entirely sure the best way to approach this, but thank you for answering those questions.
Karen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As usual, Janelle, you do a compelling argument for reasons to do this. And if the zoning was different, I would support it. My problem with the whole idea is the zoning. For us, years ago when we created this light industrial area, it was to serve the industrial folks that wanted to come in, and we've always had that there. And that's part of the growth of Rapid City, is to make sure that there's areas that are zoned industrial or light industrial, so people have a place that they can go. Because it's not easy to have zoning for industrial uses either. I mean, that's just nobody wants industrial in their neighborhood. So that's hard to do, and we've had that established for a reason, to allow industrial uses in the future. To change the zoning to office commercial, it's not only a spot zoning, but it takes away that industrial use in the future. And I know that it's hard to say, well, in 50 years or 20 years, that things will change and we need to keep that industrial use. But it could change tomorrow, and things could change. And so to put that spot zoning of office commercial right next to that industrial use is not something that I can support. If it was even general commercial, it would be better, because there's general commercial across the street. But that doesn't help you as far as your school is concerned. So I am going to stay with the industrial uses and allow our community to grow and allow industrial uses to come in an area, and I cannot support that change in ordinance. So thank you.
Can I offer a brief comment on that?
I'm going to keep going through the commissioners at this
sorry.
point. Rachel? Oh, okay. John?
The turnaround, I mean, let's say you only have 40 students, but they're going to be dropped off. You're suggesting carpools. Well, they really don't work here. You don't see people carpool. I have to fight with Corral Drive every day. So when they come in, parents are going to drop them off because they're not old enough to drive. How do they get in and out? Because most of the people who were there before go to work from 8 or 9 to 5, and they stay there. But when you have school, you're putting traffic in and out. We had the same problem up on 16 years ago when they said it's only going to be a church, and then all of a sudden it turned into a school. No turning lane. It was a bad deal. Still is.
Okay. If I can answer maybe real quick.
Yep, that'll be
Okay.
good.
Okay, first of all, the clients come in small buses, so they're dropped off, and the buses drop them off, turn around, and go back out. They do this multiple times a day. There is an entire row of parking across the front of this building that they can pull in, drop the students off, they walk directly into the school, they back out, and they exit. And there's no other traffic over here Industries' primary access is along the north here, so there's really no conflict with other traffic moving along this side here. The only reason it extended was originally, or Black Hills Works, there's like a delivery bay in the back that they don't really use now. So that was provided access, but they can actually pull in, drop students off, back out without conflicting into any other incoming or exiting traffic, and head back out Concourse Court, just the same way the buses at Black Hills Works do.
Thank you. John, does that clarify your question?
Okay. That's the parking area right there that you can pull in and park and back out. Maybe Fletcher has something better.
Is it fair to say the proposal is to leave the parking and access as is and utilize as is?
Absolutely. That was part of one of the features of the building that is so suitable. So yes.
Okay. Thank you. John? Vince?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I do appreciate what Black Hills Works does, and I've tried to use that area over there several times, taking used television sets. So there's a lot that you do, and that I can appreciate everything, and that you're in a position right now to sell your property. And I do appreciate all of the information that you brought in today. But I'm agreeing with Karen. I've spent years off of Concourse Drive and Turbine Drive in those offices that you're talking about. So yes, there are offices there. Green Tree Financial, Conseco, Nucor, ASI, GE, Capital. And with all of those businesses, they had an industrial park, if you will, that was available to them. And I started working there in '97. I no longer work there, by the way, but I'm just saying that if those businesses didn't have this area designated, as Karen pointed out, they may not have come here at all. So I'm looking at this the way Karen is.
Thanks, Vince. I got a light up from Karen again.
Yes, there was one other thought I had too on changing the zoning. If in the future something happened with that area and they wanted to do something different with the building, it probably might not happen, but if it did, that zoning for MDR, or excuse me, office commercial would allow MDR to go in there, and that building could, in the future, change to apartments or people living there, and then that would really be a conflict, in my opinion, with the industrial area. So then again, I just want to say I just can't support that zoning in that area, so thank you.
Galen?
So along those lines of talking about hypotheticals, that you could, if we rezone it today, let's say the church moves on in 20 years and wants to sell the property again, there's nothing preventing them from rezoning back to light industrial. Assuming everything else stays the same, you're going to have that spot zone of office commercial. To rezone that back to light industrial to help sell the property, and it's going to be a no-brainer. I think that would pass through without any questions asked. So I still kind of support the idea of making this project go forward because of that. So I'll make a motion here shortly, and just to clarify what the applicant said, they want to do the rezone and ask for both conditional permits. If you can only get the conditional permit for the church, it was going to be a no-go. So I'll make the motion to approve both items, the rezone from light industrial to office commercial, and also approve both conditional use permits for the church and the school.
So if I have this right, Galen, your motion is to rezone this parcel from light industrial to office commercial as part of item number 11, and then in item number 12 to approve a conditional use permit to allow an elementary or middle school and a conditional use permit to allow a church in the district.
Correct.
As item number 12. Is there a second to that motion? Justin seconds that motion.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Ken.
If I might, I just wanted to take a moment and focus on perhaps what we would call the larger bird's eye view of what's going on here, and talk a little bit about economic development and the reasoning for having the zoning as it stands today in that area. It is very important to the future of this community and our vision, which is expressed strongly in our current comprehensive plan, that we have a strong need for industrial properties, and especially into the future. It could be that the demand for certain properties in this area may not be as strong today as it might be, but as we look forward into the future needs economically of the city, we do need to maintain areas that provide for this opportunity. Carving away at it will go against the goals that have been established there. I do want to express that staff was very appreciative for the opportunity to have gone out and seen the property, and I must say that the particular circumstance of this building and the parties involved made me very sympathetic to the cause, the reason for why they're asking or requesting this. And I think that the building itself lends its well for the proposed purposes. However, pulling up a little bit and looking at the actual circumstances of those properties, there is a bit of inactivity that's happening currently on neighboring properties that could become much more intensive into the future as zoning would permit. And that zoning is, again, established for a particular purpose and need, which could cause greater incompatibility, excuse me, I'm biting my tongue on that, incompatibility in that particular area. So I just wanted to point that out. And it's not, when we talk about spot zoning, it's not about how pretty it looks on a map or how colors blend with each other. It's really about the uses that are working together on that property and what is the intended use of that area. So I just wanted to leave those thoughts.
Thank you. Justin, comments on the motion?
Thanks. Again, I'm on the fence. I think you know which way I'm leaning right now, but did I not hear there was a daycare right there though too?
Yes.
Again, the daycare there is intended to be for only the use of the industrial properties there. It is not to be expanded for greater public use for people who do not have some other reason to be in that area. So that is not something that could be considered a school, and it's very limited in its applicability in that area.
So you have to work in the park to use that daycare?
I'm sorry, say
You
that
have to
again?
work in the park to use that daycare?
That is,
They restrict that?
I'm not sure what the particular requirements are, but that is the purpose.
We'll have to, if you want to comment.
I'm not trying to create a huge discussion about it. I'm just saying it seems to me that there is some inconsistencies, because if we're allowing a daycare, what do people do at daycare? They drop their kids off at 7:30 and pick them up at 5:30. I mean, so we're already allowing some of that use to happen in an industrial park. So I see both sides of this argument very clearly. I think maybe not 100%, but I think they're valid points on both sides. I would say from the bigger picture, I think that as a community, allowing good organizations that are trying to do the right thing and allow more options for schooling for our kids. Everybody complains about schools and lack of options and all that. We're providing more options for kids and people who are associated with this church to utilize for a private school. I think that's a good thing. I see the conflict with the planning, but I guess at the end of the day, I think I support this. So,
Mike Kwasny?
I think Black Hills Works it does a lot of great things. I can understand their need to sell a building. I just don't know that we should change our comprehensive plan for the need for to sell a building. My thought is that we do need for future, we need the zoning as we have it. I agree with some of the statements that have been made up here that we have to have that area so that we can bring businesses into this. We can show them that we have this, we have it in place. We need to make sure that we can maintain that for them so that they feel confident that that's what our plan is, and then they go along with the plan. When we start changing all these plans, we lose what are they going to do in the future, and I think it's just important that we stick with what we have. I will be voting to, as the staff has recommended, deny this. I know that we have another, we brought it up differently right now, but I would go with the staff's plan more so. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. So the motion on the floor is to
Okay.
approve a rezoning from light industrial to office commercial and the associated conditional uses, and item 12 to approve those for a church and middle school. Are there further questions, comments on the motion on the floor? Or are we at the point where
Can I offer just a very brief comment? Kind of in response to some of the concerns about the use of this area as an industrial park. We didn't get a chance to see an overhead view of the industrial park. There, again, this was started in the 70s. There are numerous vacant lots that are available of varying sizes and numerous unplatted lots that are available. We've worked with Rapid City Economic Development Foundation over the past few years in isolated areas where they've added other properties, but their property extends all the way north to Anamosa Street. So there are multiple opportunities available for growth in industrial that will remain with this park. We are nowhere near to filling that use, nowhere near. Thank you.
Janelle. Karen?
I guess as a last comment for me also is, I think that having this industrial park, it took a lot to get this park put together, and years ago, and to make sure that there was a place for folks who wanted to do that. And as our community grows, I think there's going to be even a greater need. The buildings are there. We've had spec buildings out there to encourage economic development to come in, and it's happened over time, but it will also increase over time. I feel strongly that we need to stay where we are, to allow our community to grow in the future, and having a school out there, it doesn't fit with the industrial area, and I wish that we could make that happen, but we can't change the zoning. That would just not work, and to allow something like that to occur. So, and I also want to make a comment about the daycare that was out there. When that came forward, that was a controversial item also because of the daycare itself. But we felt at the time that having a daycare to help the people who worked out there was a good thing. And so we allowed a daycare to serve just those folks out there, and to encourage more people to be able to come to their offices and come to their industrial uses and have a place for their children. So it was controversial at the time, I think, but we supported that to support the industrial uses out there. So that's my last comment.
Thanks, Karen. Any further comments on the motion on the floor before we take a vote? So to reiterate, the vote is currently on a motion by Galen, seconded by Justin, to approve a rezone from light industrial to office commercial, and to approve a conditional use permit for the middle school, and a conditional use or elementary and middle school, and a conditional use permit for a church for the parcel in question. All those in favor of this motion, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. Let's take a roll call.
Eric Braun.
No.
Karen Bowman. Rachel's. Okay. Rachel Caesar. Mike Gallagher. John Herr. Galen Hugestrat. Kurt Hughes. Oh, that's right. Mike Kwasny. Justin Van Grafischi. Motion fails 6-2 with one abstention.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we still need a motion on this one, or are we, Wade? So we'd look for still to act on this item. Is there another motion?
Oh, got that louder? I'll make a motion to support the staff's recommendation on item 11 to deny the rezoning, and on item 12 to allow the church to be in there through a conditional use permit, but not the school.
Second.
So Mike Kwasny seconded that motion by Karen to deny the rezoning in item 11 and to follow staff recommendations on item 12 to allow a conditional use permit for a church and deny the conditional use permit for the elementary and middle school. Discussion on that motion? All those in favor?
Mr. Chair?
Yeah,
Yes,
Nikki?
Just a clarification. I think Janelle's got a question on that
Yeah.
motion.
The applicants don't want the church approved without, so if you were willing to amend your motion to just deny across the board, it would be cleaner for us moving forward.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah,
if it's the
Vicki.
desire of the applicant to withdraw the church request, then the action would be to deny the rezone, to deny the school, and to acknowledge the withdrawal of the church.
Well, there might be an
They're going to
appeal, right?
appeal. Yes.
Okay,
They'll
very
appeal, so we don't want to withdraw it at this point, but if, it's fine if you want to, because they're not going to take or accept the approval of just the church use. That wouldn't work for Black Hills Works because it doesn't work for the Seventh-day Adventists, so then it would be kind of an inappropriate condition to have on that property for Black Hills Works.
Mr. Chair, my recommendation would be to stick with the motion that Karen provided as recommended by staff. They can appeal that item forward to council and then make a decision at council, but I think the Planning Commission and the staff have indicated approval of our support for the church. And then they can still appeal the entire item to the City Council for consideration.
Okay. That appears to be the intent of the motion maker. Does the second agree with that? Okay. So the motion on the floor is to deny the rezoning in item number 11 and still approve the conditional use permit for the church, but deny the conditional use permit for the elementary and middle school on item 12. Further questions, comments? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. I'm hearing 2 noes from Galen and Justin. Is that correct? So the motion carries 6-2 this time. Any discussion items today? Staff items, other items? Okay. I'd look for a motion to adjourn. Rachel made the motion. Galen seconded the motion. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.